Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, tarot enthusiast, and your local witch next door, and today I'm talking about tarot and sage. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. All right, so I recently did a tarot card crafting event virtually, and if you weren't able to attend or didn't register in time, you can go ahead and get my full hour-long recording with the step-by-step method, examples of tarot cards I've created, journaling questions, and a 15-page PDF to walk you all through it for just $33. You can click here in the show notes to purchase now. I'm going to be offering a 12-week Tarot for Transformation live course this summer. If you're interested, you can sign up to get more information. If you love the show, the best way to support it right now or for free is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. I just updated my Patreon benefits to be bigger and better than ever. If you want an individual card pulled for you once a month live on the podcast during my New Moon Collective readings, join the Everyday Tarot Patreon family at the Lovers level. If you'd like to support the podcast even further, you can get a one-time individual 5-card reading in addition to all the other benefits if you join the Witch Bitch level on the Patreon. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, you can join us at our next Let's Talk Tarot meetup group event. We'll be meeting at the old Hangout, which is in the downstairs of the Tacoma McMinimans, the Elks Lodge, from 1 to 3 p.m. on July 27th. Bring your tarot cards, your questions, and your obsession. Come meet other witchy and tarot folks in your community, and the link to RSVP for that is in the show notes as well. If you're interested in my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you at the beginning of this year, you can get that by joining my newsletter list. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on upcoming events, presentations, musings, and more. And if you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist seeing clients virtually all over Washington State. I love working with queer, poly, and witchy clients. If you'd like to work with a therapist that doesn't judge you, is witchy just like you, and helps you learn how to deal with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex, head to my website and book a free consultation now to start your journey. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull on each episode. All right, so welcome to season 11, where I'm talking all about tarot and plant allies. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can check those out. In season 1, I talked tarot basics. Seasons 2 and 3, I went through all the major arcana cards and an overview of the 4 suits. Season 4, I talked tarot and pop culture. Season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Season 6, 7, and 8, and 9, I went through all of the suits, starting with wands, pentacles, swords, then cups. And season 10 that I just wrapped up was all about tarot and witchcraft. And like I said, we are on to season 11, talking about tarot and plant allies. And today I'm talking about tarot and sage. So I'll go through an overview of everything we'll talk about in the episode, which will include a plant description. We'll talk about plant magic, relation to the tarot, and uses for the plant itself. All right, so to talk about sage the plant, I'll be referencing the Medicinal Herb Coloring Book by Omani Omerge and Nicole Rose. So sage, the official name for it is Salvia officinalis. Sage is a perennial plant native to the Mediterranean and grown in gardens throughout the world for its culinary flavor. Sage is a powerful antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal herb that is used for acute and chronic infections, colds, flus, and chest infections where there is a lot of dampness and cold. It is widely used in gargles, for sore throats, and dental issues because of its antiseptic and astringent actions. Sage is also a tonic for the brain and nervous system where there are stress-related issues such as headaches and migraines. Sage can aid digestion, relax bloating, ease wind, and support the liver and pancreas to improve both appetite and absorption of nutrients. Its antiseptic nature also makes it useful for urinary tract infections, and externally is a first aid herb for skin problems. So that's sort of the herbalism of sage. So sage itself looks like a large bush on each stem, which can also get pretty woody. You have greenish gray, fairly large leaves that are quite soft to the touch. If you look on the back of them, there's sort of ribbing and almost looks like veins of the leaf. As you get towards the tip of the flower or the stem, you get purple flowers that are sometimes in a little bit of a bunch, not as close together as lavender, where they're all on one stem, but sage tends to grow a flower or two or three, and then send stems out on either side, grow a couple flowers, and then keep growing further up, branch out, send out more flowers, grow up, send out more flower, like to go like that. And like I said, the leaves are sort of a gray, green, blue color. Some are a bit more silvery than others. Sage gets to be quite a large plant. It's very hardy, at least, where I am, more hardy than lavender that I talked about last episode. And sage, I have a plant outside that I started from seed that is 3 to 4 feet in diameter. So quite large. I had it in my raised beds when I first was sort of nurturing it, and it got to be way too big. It took up a 4x4 bed. So I moved it out, kicked it out onto my hill that's very dry, gets a lot of sun. Because it grew up in the Mediterranean, or that's where its roots are. Mediterranean plants are very heat and drought tolerant generally, but they can also handle winter rain, because I guess that is sort of the climate in the Mediterranean. So even if where I live it gets much colder than the Mediterranean, we still have that sort of climate where in the winter we get rain and a lot of moisture and humidity, and then in the summer we have none of that. We have dry, hot summer. And so that is one of the things this plant can handle, which is probably why it thrives here. So again, sort of looks similar to lavender, has a strong scent like lavender, has purple flowers like lavender. It has a lot more like tree leaves on it versus lavender, which has little tiny leaves that are very thin, matchstick thin generally. So that is sort of a plant description of sage. So let's talk about some plant magic. We'll reference the Parting the Mists blog that I've been talking about. And in here, they're talking about specifically white sage. So there are different types of sage. There's white sage. There's also culinary sage. White sage has historically been used for purification and cleansing. If you've ever heard of smudging or cleansing or sage smudging, those words, that to use sort of bundling up sage all together when it's dry, putting twine around it or pulling it very tight, letting it dry, and then burning it from one end to another in the same way that incense would go if you have incense sticks. Or Palo Santo or other things. Palo Santo is more woody, sage is more greeny plant material. But yeah, so that is sort of white sage. White sage has been used historically for cleansing, when people talk about, again, smudging or cleansing a room, they're often using sage. White sage in particular has been over harvested in the wild and the plant is endangered. So please don't buy white sage from just any witchy store without knowing where it came from. We don't want the plant to go away, especially because it's been historically used by a lot of native folks in their spiritual practices. And other places. So yeah, again, please don't buy it from stores like that. Again, often they are at witchy sort of stores. Sometimes it will say if it's cultivated or grown, which is better. Again, you still don't necessarily know if that's true, but just make sure about your sourcing. I grow sage. I use it culinarily, but also I just really like it as a beautiful plant. So if I do any sage burning, I use my own sage. And I have enough sage that I can make bundles for every single person I know, probably for the rest of time. You can make a sage bundle with like a single stem of sage, because the stems can get like 2 feet long. And so, like I said, I probably have, I don't know, 250 stems on the sage plant I have outside. So like, again, you can create a lot from that, but because it's been over harvested, because it sort of became trendy, we don't want to threaten the plant species. That's very important that we're being mindful about that. So just kind of like an overall warning, again, an encouragement to grow your own sage. If you don't have a lot of space, you can grow sage probably inside. You can grow sage in a pot, on a balcony, or anything like that. Herbs are really great to grow because they're expensive to buy, and they can really improve the taste of your food, especially if you're used to just buying dried herbs. And again, sage, I'll have some culinary recipes that I share later, but yeah. So that's a warning on sage. But yeah, sage itself, or sort of its essence or energy, it is a stronger plant, stronger than lavender, or just like it's a little more blunt than lavender. It says, like it can be wrapped up with like spiritual crisis, like consciousness. You might, so I'm speaking from the Herb Crafters Tarot by Letitia Guthrie and artist Joanna Pole Colbert. They speak about sage as, let's see, you can rise to the challenge and accept the truth. White sage has become a trendy spiritual tool. It is sacred to many of the indigenous people of North America whose traditions are widely misused. Development and erosion also threaten their survival of the species. So white sage is teaching us to protect what is holy. It rids the air of toxins, but is also a valued medicinal. Clear the path, listen to others, and make room for healing. Seek a solution that is beneficial to all. And again, like it can be about the spiritual crisis, like might be challenging long-held beliefs. Though your conscience pulls at you, you're reluctant to let go of those opinions, right? And again, sage is sort of trying to perhaps teach us collectively right now that we have to protect what's important to us, right? We have to protect this plant because it is really traditionally used a lot of ways. It's sacred. We don't want to have those plants die out or become even more endangered than they are, or have the species die out. So it's also about kind of getting rid of the toxins like in your life, toxic people, or situations, or abusive ones, listening to others, like being empathetic, making room for healing, both in yourself and again, like in your relationships, and seeking a solution that's beneficial to all. Sage really asks us to like come to the table, I would say, right? Like a family dinner or a family meal, right? It's telling us, okay, bring me everything you've got. We're going to like hash it out. We are going to talk about it. We're going to figure things out together. And we're not going to just, we're not just going to buy sage from the witchy store because we have heard that it's really good for cleansing our home and destroy the species, right? Again, individual actions do matter collectively. But you can also get to know plants local to you for any sort of like smoke cleansing. So again, smoke cleansing is sort of the generic term. Smudging, usually I don't say that word because that is like the sacred ritual used with sage. North American indigenous practices are considered to be usually a closed practice, which means that if you're not already part of that community or you haven't been mentored into it or grew up with it from your own ancestors or again mentors that have brought you in and taught you, that you should not be using it. So again, we can use plants. You could use lavender for cleansing. You can use other plants for cleansing your own home, for burning and sacred rituals of your own making. You don't have to use sage. And so again, you could grow it and use it, like, sure, feel free. But right, we have to familiarize ourselves with the origins of spiritual tools, where the botanicals are grown, where the practices come from, as part of being like mindful spiritual people. We want to listen and protect and keep some of those practices sacred. Again, if we have our own sacred practices that we're learning and creating, we need to also be very respectful of others. And again, sage sort of like calls us into that, right? We can refuse to buy things like that, even if they're being sold near us. And also, listen to conservationists, support United Plant Savers efforts to preserve the plant, because it is very important. So all of that information came from the Parting the Myths blog that I will link in the show notes. What else? It says this card's all about telling us to challenge our beliefs, making room for growth and healing. There's more than one way to go about something. So consider a different method or ideology if your current one is keeping you held back or even hurting you. And again, like, this is very interesting that, right, this gets wrapped into this, the plant itself and how it's being over harvested. But you can use other plants like rosemary or lavender, eucalyptus, garden sage, sweetgrass, cedar. Those are all plants that can be cultivated and grown in gardens, and that like you can also choose to burn as smoke cleansing to cleanse spaces. All right, that was a bit of a rant. So let's go into the relation to tarot. So I looked up what other folks said about its relation to tarot on the Rattlesnakes and Rainbows website, talking about International Plant Medicine Artist for Hire. They created a deck, and in their deck they aligned the hermit with the plant of sage. They talk about it being Virgo, so like earth energy, and again talking about that it's about alchemical transformation, wisdom, inner teachers, completion, self-realization, initiation, turning within, maturity, introspection. And though a lot of those, I think of things that's intertwining with the Hermit card. So I pulled some of my Hermit cards from my decks. So in the Goddess of Love tarot deck by Gabriella Herstick and Julia Popescu, I pulled the Hermit here. I pulled the Hermit from the Sacerobito tarot deck by Sassia Burrington, which depicts like a hiker perched on the side of a mountain at sunrise. Again, that sort of idea of like retreating, going inward, going into the woods to kind of find yourself or find the important things to you, to reconnect, to sort of center ourselves. And then the Hermit card is also about bringing that knowledge back into community as well. And then the other one that I thought of, I didn't see anyone talk about this, but I did find a blog that talked about wordsandcunning.com, which I referenced before, just talking about sage and the plant. They talk about sage as the crone of wisdom, which I really liked. And when I thought about that, I thought about the Queen of Pentacles cards, which again, like Pentacles would be the earth sign, Queens would be that sort of like crone energy, right? The sort of like, again, we even use the word sage to mean like a wise mentor or a wise person. I just really connected with like, oh, I think like the Queen of Pentacles would be like this. And I actually chose the card, which is the Queen of Cactus from the Desert Illuminations Tarot deck by Lindsay D. Williams, that uses Southwest inspired like imagery and different things. So they renamed the Pentacles suit to be Cactus. And here we see, like, what's depicted is like this sort of like queen alien with a cactus, almost like wearing it like a pendant on her chest. And she has this beautiful rainbow aura around her. And we see the sort of cosmos of sparkling in the background of stars. Again, very connected. that earth, like also fire and air energy associated with sage. The zodiac signs associated with sage, as talked about on the wordsandcunning.com, are Gemini and Sagittarius. The planets of Jupiter, Moon, and Mercury. I did choose to put this out on a Thursday because that is Jupiter's day. What else? Yeah, you use the aerial parts of the plant, which just means like the leafy parts. It's native to southeastern Europe, but it's grown in a lot of places all over the world. Yeah, it needs full sun and well-drained soil with moderate watering. You can collect it in spring. So if you're going to collect the leaves generally of a plant, you generally collect them before the plant flowers. So I pulled some leaves off of mine that were new growth, but the flowers of sage usually grow on second year growth. So they will grow on the woodier stems. And so I also pulled a woodier stem that had the small parts of leaves and then the flower parts. And yeah, mine, because I'm in summer now, it's been flowering for quite a while and the flowers are kind of like almost done. So it will be a more bitter plant if you harvest it at that time. Just like a lot of plants, once they've flowered, they often become bitter because they're not putting their energy into the root or the leaf anymore. They're putting their energy into the flower to sort of spread seed and continue, right, growing elsewhere. The flavor of sage is pungent or bitter. It's a warming temperature, right? Often kind of, yeah, like it gets used, I'll talk about a little bit shortly, but like with potatoes or like other kind of like things that don't necessarily have a lot of inherent flavor. Yeah, sage, again, if you feel it, the plant is very soft. It's not very watery. It's like dry and then sometimes kind of like oily or a little bit resinous. And yeah, it gets widely used. So let's talk about uses of sage here. So I'm pulling out the Hearth Witches Compendium, Magical and Natural Living for Every Day by Anna Franklin. So again, let's get into their description of magical uses of sage, magical herbalism. So sage is associated with wisdom, prophetic dreams, warding off the evil eye, purification, cleansing, aura cleansing, and immortality. It is ruled by the planet Jupiter and the element of air. It is sacred to Consus, Jupiter, and Zeus. All right, so getting into some usage for sage. So yeah, sage and potatoes is like a common one. So in here they have a recipe for using butter, a whole onion, a teaspoon of sage finely chopped, which again, like if you have a plant of sage, a teaspoon of sage is like a leaf. So you could make so many sage and potatoes. You could make it every day for a whole year with a plant and you'd probably still have more leaves. You can use a pint of vegetable stock, salt and pepper, and 2 pounds of new potatoes peeled and boiled. Yeah, and here they melt the butter with onion. Then you add the sage, the stock, and seasoning, and you kind of boil it all together until the liquid's reduced, and then slice the potatoes and add them to the pan. Cook until the potatoes are thoroughly heated. So you're almost just like infusing your water that you're using for the potatoes with sage, and getting some butter in there and veggie stock as well, which sounds delightful. If it wasn't so hot where I am, I would consider eating that tonight, but I don't really want to run the oven. Another thing I found, which I've never heard of, is a hazelnut tart. This book is sort of like UK based, I believe, and so they talk about hazelnuts in here. They talk about nuts are a Celtic symbol of concentrated wisdom, the sweetness of knowledge contained within a hard shell. The hazel has many connections with the festival of the autumn equinox. So this one is really right. You're using hazelnut as the main ingredient, and then you're adding sage into it to sort of bring out that flavor. It would be something you might do in the fall, which is generally when nuts are harvested, or it says around the autumn equinox. And so it's, yeah, you use pastry flour, flour, an onion, some butter, ground hazelnuts, eggs, some stock as well, some miso, marmite or Vegemite, and a tablespoon of fresh sage chopped, and salt and pepper to taste. And you sort of make like a tart or like a pastry basically with this hazelnut in the middle. That's sort of, again, the sage is a complementary flavor there. So sage isn't necessarily going to be the main flavor, although hazelnuts are all very earthy and also, I mean, different than sage, but sage sort of brings out flavor in that way. So some edible things with sage, because there's lots of things you can do with sage to eat it, but there's this thing called a milk bath in here. So it's like literally like you can add milk to your bath, but here they talk about you can buy like dried milk powder if you don't want to like literally add liquid milk to your bath, and you can make an herby milk bath. So it has 2 ounces of powdered milk, an ounce of corn flour or cornstarch, and then half a teaspoon of dried rosemary, half a teaspoon of dried lavender, and half a teaspoon of dried sage. You combine all the ingredients in a blender, and then you store it in an airtight container, and you can add 2 tablespoons at a time to your bath. And again, usually milk baths sort of soften and rejuvenate the skin, moisturizing, and combats dryness. So probably a good thing to use if it's dry where you are in the winter, perhaps when it's colder out and you might take more baths, at least where I am. But yeah, it's very interesting. Rosemary, lavender, and sage. So you can refer to all my episodes of the podcast to learn about rosemary, lavender, and sage, and make this herby milk bath. And then the final thing, so again, lots of things with sage. There were lots of references in here, but one that I've never heard of is a color rinse. So it's like an herbal air rinse that you can use to add subtle highlights or color to your hair when used over a period of time. It's not going to dye it to a different shade. It's just going to sort of lightly change things. So they have different color rinses for different colors of hair in here. So the ones for brunettes in here has sage under it. So some other ones they list are bay leaves, black coffee, black tea, catnip, elderberries, green walnut shells, ivy berries, parsley, raspberry leaves, rosemary, sage, and vine leaves. And so if you're gonna do this color rinsing thing, you first wash and rinse your hair clean of shampoo with plenty of running water. So actually first, before you do that, you make a strong infusion or decoction of one of your chosen herb. Then you cool and strain, which generally just means you like pick some of the leaves or flowers, you put it in, I guess, usually hot water, almost like you would tea, and then you let it sit for a bit, let it cool, and then you strain it, so get the parts out of it, and then you keep the liquid. So then you go in the shower, you wash or rinse your hair clean of shampoo with plenty of running water. You have your coloring rinse ready and standing in the basin. You can use a jug to pour or rinse the rinse over your hair. So yeah, actually you should maybe do this outside of the shower, like over a sink or something, because ideally you want to like reuse the water over and over and over while you do it right in that moment. So yeah, you like pour the jug, pour it over your hair, and then scoop the runoff and keep pouring it at least a dozen times, it says. And then you can rinse it once with clean water afterwards. Repeat weekly and the color will gradually intensify, though it will always be much more subtle than a chemical hair dye. Now, it doesn't tell you in here like exactly what lighting or darkening to your hair that it adds. Because some of these, for the brunette ones at least, they're all like, to me, clearly dark colors like coffee or tea or elderberries. Those are all very dark. Green walnut shells, like walnuts, dye things like a black green color. Ivy berries, raspberry leaves, like all of those things are. But yeah, that's interesting. So if you want to see what happens with your hair and you're a brunette, you can use some sage for that. You can also use it to darken gray hair, apparently in here it talks about. So yeah, again, you know, for those with darker hair, there's other ones for blondes or redheads with other things where you can use calendula, or for either of those, you can use saffron or turmeric if you want to be kind of more yellowy blonde. But yeah, this is very interesting. I hadn't necessarily heard of, I mean, I know like people dye their hair with like henna, or, you know, like lemon juice or things like that to get some highlights. That was definitely a thing when I was younger, but I hadn't heard of hair rinses with like herbs necessarily before. All right, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. What does Sage want to tell us? What sage wisdom? What wisdom does Sage have for us here? And I'm going to pull from the Therapist Who Tarot deck, prompts by Drea Bloom and images done by Rebecca Bloom. I'm going to give it a quick shuffle. Okay, and I pulled the Six of Cups, which it says is about memories. And we sort of see 6 cups that are overturned, like sitting on the ground, but the waters or whatever's in it spilling out. And then we almost see like little like wispy images of like ghosts above it in the image. So this deck does not have a tarot deck guidebook, but it has reflection questions on the back. So those questions are: what seeds should you be planting? In what area of your life should you be more decisive? And what should you cut out of your life? So again, here's our sage wisdom, right? What seeds should you be planting? So what new things are starting? What area of your life should you be more decisive and like kind of make decisions, right? Or maybe, right, what should you cut out of your life? Or maybe who should you cut out of your life if you're having any kind of like toxic relationship patterns come up? And yeah, maybe again, that's where like I just feel very like, oh yeah, there's like boundaries going on in this card. And also that sort of like burn it downness of that I talked about earlier, of kind of the, okay, we have to make room for new things. We have to get rid of old things, have to end for us to come into new things there. So all right, so that's it for today. To wrap up, if you'd like to join me on the journey of using the tarot for transformation, click on the link in the show notes to indicate your interest in receiving more info. It won't commit you to anything right now. You'll just be on the list to start getting information about when to sign up and stuff like that. We'll be working together for 12 weeks of calls and journaling to discover what happens when we want to transform our lives through the tarot. And links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. You can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com, with your thoughts, questions, and more. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.